Hey there. Welcome to Mr. Darky's corner of the internet. I'm your host for tonight's journey into the shadows. Before we dive in, if you enjoy these late night tales, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, but only if the darkness calls to you. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is in your part of the world. It reminds me we're all connected by our love of a good scare. Now, get comfortable and turn down those lights, and let's step into the story together. Marcus's fuel gauge had been hovering near empty for the last 20 minutes, that anxious orange light glowing like a warning he'd chosen to ignore. He'd left Portland in a fury after the argument with Sarah, thrown clothes in a bag without really looking at what he was packing, and started driving with no particular destination in mind. Just away. Just somewhere that wasn't the apartment they'd shared for 3 years. The apartment that still smelled like her perfume and her accusations. The highway had gradually narrowed from 4 lanes to 2, then from 2 to something that barely qualified as 1.5. The forest had closed in on both sides. Towering Douglas firs that blocked out the stars and created a tunnel of darkness broken only by his headlights. He hadn't seen another car in over an hour. Hadn't passed a gas station or a rest stop or any sign of human levitation since that laugh town, the one whose name he'd already forgotten. So when the sign appeared, promising food and presumably fuel, Marcus felt a surge of relief that overrode the unease the sign itself should have triggered. Because really, what kind of name was Mr. Darky's? And what did "we know what you need" mean? It sounded less like advertising and more like a threat. But his stomach was as empty as his gas tank, and the alternative was running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere and spending the night in his car, surrounded by forests that seemed to press closer with each passing mile. 2 miles later, exactly as promised, he saw lights through the trees. The establishment appeared gradually, like something coming into focus. First just a glow, diffuse and yellow, then taken shape as windows and what looked like neon signs, though the specific words were still too distant to read. The building itself was small, barely larger than a residential garage, constructed from logs that had darkened with age and weather. It sat in a clearing that seemed too perfectly circular to be natural, surrounded by forest so dense that Marcus couldn't see more than a few feet past the tree line. A hand-painted sign above the structure confirmed the name: Murdered Darky's Drive-Thru. Below it, in smaller letters that seemed to have been added later, painted in a different hand: no refunds, no exceptions, no kidding. The drive-through lane was marked by old railroad ties that had been driven into the ground like fence posts, creating a path that curved around the building. Dim bulbs strung on wire provided just enough light to see the order window, which was closed, and a speaker box that looked like it had been salvaged from a drive-in theater circa 1950. Marcus pulled up to the speaker and rolled down his window. The night air that rushed in was colder than it should have been for September, carrying smells of pine and damp earth, and something else, something organic and slightly sweet, like fruit just beginning to rot. He sat there for a moment, waiting. No crackling static from the speaker, no cheerful greeting, just silence and the idle of his engine, in the absolute darkness of the forest, pressing in on all sides. He was about to pull forward to try the window itself when the speaker came to life, not with static or the usual drive-through sounds, but with breathing. Someone on the other end was breathing, slow and deliberate, as if they'd been running and were trying to catch their breath, or as if they were smelling something, savoring it. "Hello?" Marcus said, feeling foolish talking to a speaker box in the middle of the forest at. He checked his phone. 1:47 in the morning. The breathing stopped. Then a voice emerged from the speaker, and it was wrong in ways Marcus couldn't immediately articulate. not mechanically distorted like normal drive-through speakers made voices sound, but wrong in its essence. Too smooth, too even, like someone doing an impression of human speech rather than actually speaking. "Welcome to Mr. Darky's," the voice said. Male, probably, though it was hard to be certain. "We've been expecting you, Marcus." Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward the gear shift. He hadn't given his name, hadn't mentioned it anywhere. His credit cards were in his wallet in his pocket, not like he'd used them at a drive-through speaker anyway. "How do you... We know what you need," the voice interrupted, and there was something that might have been amusement in its tone. "That's what the sign says. That's what we do. We know." "I just need gas," Marcus said, "and maybe something to eat. Do you have gas?" "We have everything," the voice assured him. "But first, your order. We'll start with what you're hungry for, and then we'll discuss the rest." Marcus realized he was gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles ache. Everything about this situation was wrong. The isolated location, the bizarre name, the voice that knew him, the way the forest seemed to lean in, listening. He should leave. Should throw the car in reverse and take his chances with the empty gas tank and the dark highway. But he was so hungry and so tired. And the argument with Sarah kept playing in his head, her voice rising to that particular pitch that meant she was past anger and into contempt. "You never commit to anything, Marcus. Not to your job, not to your friends, not to me. You just coast through life, taking the easy way out, and you wonder why nothing ever works out for you." The voice from the speaker was waiting, patient, as if it had all the time in the world. "I guess a burger," Marcus said. "Fries, whatever you have." "Oh, we have much more than that." The voice seemed pleased now, warm even, though the warmth was like the heat from the fever. "We have what you really want, Marcus, what you really need. But we'll start simple. One special delivery meal with a side of truth. And for your drink, I get an order. Your drink, Marcus. Coke. I'll have a Coke." "No," the voice said firmly. "You'll have the consequences. It pairs better with what you've ordered. Pull forward to the window. Your order will be ready in 3 minutes. Exactly 3 minutes. Do not attempt to leave during those 3 minutes. Do not turn off your engine. Do not use your phone. Just wait. Can you do that, Marcus? Can you wait?" He was about to pull forward, to try the window itself, when the speaker came to life. Not with static or the usual drive-through sounds, but with breathing. Someone on the other end was breathing, slow and deliberate, as if they'd been running and were trying to catch their breath, or as if they were smelling something, savoring it. "Hello," Marcus said, feeling foolish, talking to a speaker box in the middle of the forest at, he checked his phone, 1:47 in the morning. The breathing stopped. Then a voice emerged from the speaker, and it was wrong in ways Marcus couldn't immediately articulate. Not mechanically distorted like normal drive-through speakers made voices sound, but wrong in its essence. Too smooth, too even, like someone doing an impression of human speech rather than actually speaking. "Welcome to Mr. Darky's," the voice said. Male, probably, though it was hard to be certain. "We've been expecting you, Marcus." Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward the gear shift. He hadn't given his name, hadn't mentioned it anywhere. His credit cards were in his wallet in his pocket, not like he'd used them at a drive-through speaker anyway. "How do you..." "We know what you need," the voice interrupted, and there was something that might have been amusement in its tone. "That's what the sign says. That's what we do. We know." "I just need gas," Marcus said, "and maybe something to eat. Do you have gas?" "We have everything," the voice assured him. "But first, your order will start with what you're hungry for, and then we'll discuss the rest." Marcus realized he was gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make his knuckles ache. Everything about this situation was wrong. The isolated location, the bizarre name, the voice that knew him, the way the forest seemed to lean in, listening. He should leave, should throw the car in reverse and take his chances with the empty gas tank and the dark highway. But he was so hungry, and so tired, and the argument with Sarah kept playing in his head, her voice rising to that particular pitch that meant she was past anger and into contempt. You never commit to anything, Marcus. Not to your job, not to your friends, not to me. You just coast through life taking the easy way out, and you wonder why nothing ever works out for you. The voice from the speaker was waiting, patient, as if you had all the time in the world. I guess a burger, Marcus said. Fries, whatever you have. Oh, we have much more than that. The voice seemed pleased now, warm even, though the warmth was like the heat from a fever. We have what you really want, Marcus. What you really need. But we'll start simple. One special delivery meal with a side of truth. And for your drink. I didn't order your drink, Marcus. Coke. I'll have a Coke. No, the voice said firmly. You'll have the consequences. It pairs better with what you've ordered. Pull forward to the window. Your order will be ready in 3 minutes. Exactly 3 minutes. Do not attempt to leave during those 3 minutes. Do not turn off your engine. Do not use your phone. Just wait. Can you do that, Marcus? Can you wait? Not swaying in the wind. There was no wind. Moving deliberately. The trees shifting position. Branches reaching out like fingers. The spaces between the trunks narrowing. As the entire forest pressed closer to his car. And in those narrowing spaces, he could see faces. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Pale faces with black eyes. All watching him. All waiting. Those are the people who tried to leave without paying, the person at the window explained conversationally. They become part of Mr. Darky's. Part of the forest. Part of the help. It's not so bad, really. You don't feel hungry anymore. You don't feel much of anything. Just the pull of the drive-through, the need to serve to collect payment from the next customer who pulls up to the speaker box. Marcus forced himself to look away from the forest, from those terrible waiting faces. What do you want from me? I told you, payment. For the truth will need the memory of your happiest day. The day you felt most alive, most certain that life was worth living. That's the price for seeing what's true about yourself. And the consequences for that. The person's smile became almost sympathetic. For that, we'll need you to forget someone you love, completely, as if they never existed. We'll take every memory of them, every moment you shared, every word they spoke to you. You can choose who. We're not monsters. But someone must be sacrificed for you to understand the weight of your choices. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. I can't. I won't. You can't make me. You're right. We can't make you. The person gestured at the back again. But you can't leave until the transaction is complete. Those are the rules. You can sit here in your car forever, watching your gas gauge drop to empty, watching the forest close in, feeling your hunger grow until it consumes everything else. Or you can pay, eat your meal, learn what we have to teach you, and drive away. Most people choose to pay. The ones in the forest chose to wait. You can see how well that worked out for them. The happiest day, he said quietly. Take it, and I'll forget my freshman roommate, David. We were friends for 1 semester before he transferred. It won't leave too big a hole. The person at the window looked genuinely disappointed. Still trying to game the system, Marcus. Still trying to pay the minimum. That's what got you here in the first place, isn't it? That's what Sarah was yelling about. You never give yourself fully to anything. Always holding back, always protecting yourself, always looking for the easy way out. They leaned closer, and Marcus could see that their eyes weren't just black. They were hollow, windows into a darkness that went down forever. We know what you need, Marcus. We always know. And what you need is to learn that some things are worth the price. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to eat your meal. You're going to drink your consequences. And you're going to pay with the memory you're most afraid to lose. Not the easy one. Not the freshman roommate you barely remember anyway. The one that matters. The one that made you who you are.
No.
But the person's hand was already moving through the window again, reaching for Marcus's, and he couldn't move, couldn't dodge, couldn't do anything but watch as those pale fingers touched his forehead and began to pull. This time the extraction was excruciating. Marcus felt his mind being rifled through like a filing cabinet, memories being examined and discarded, the person searching for the exact right one to take. They passed over his childhood, his teenage years, his time in college. They lingered for a moment on his memories of Sarah, considering, then moved on, and then they found what they were looking for. His mother's passing away. No! Marcus tried to scream, but his voice wouldn't work. Not that! Please! Anything but that! This one, the person said softly. This is the memory that taught you to be afraid of commitment. You loved her so much and you lost her so suddenly, and you swore you'd never let yourself be that vulnerable again. This is the wound that's been driving all your decisions, keeping you safe and small and alone. This is what you need to pay. I'll die without it. I'll forget who I am. No, you'll forget why you're afraid, and maybe, just maybe, you'll learn to live differently. Isn't that what you wanted when you left Portland tonight? A chance to start over? To be someone new? The hand tightened on Marcus' forehead, and he felt the memory beginning to come loose. His mother's face already starting to blur, her voice growing faint, the feeling of her hand holding his in the hospital slipping away like water through his fingers. Wait, Marcus gasped out. What's in the bag? What am I actually buying with all this? The person paused. Truth, Marcus. Just like it says. You'll eat your meal and you'll see yourself clearly for the first time in years. You'll understand every choice you've made, every relationship you've sabotaged, every opportunity you've let slip away. You'll see the person you could have been and the person you actually are. And then you'll have to live with that knowledge. And if I don't want that, is I'd rather stay ignorant. Then you become part of the forest, part of us, part of Mr. Darky's, forever serving, forever waiting, forever trapped in the movement of your own cowardice. The faces in the trees were pressing closer now, their mouths open in silent screams or pleas or warnings. Marcus could see that some of them had been here a long time, decades, maybe centuries. Their features were almost worn away, becoming indistinguishable from the bark of the trees themselves. Soon, they wouldn't be people at all, just wood and shadow and the memory of human faces. Fine, Marcus whispered. Take it, take the memory. I'll pay your price. The person smiled their terrible smile and pulled. The extraction felt like dying. Marcus felt his mother's memory being ripped out of his mind, taking with it whole sections of his identity. Her death, yes, but also her life. The way she'd sung off-key while making breakfast. The way she'd always called him my little man, even when he was 30. The way she'd held him when his father left, promising him that everything would be all right, even though neither of them believed it. The way she'd looked in her hospital bed, so small and fragile, asking him to promise he'd be brave. All of it pulled out like a thread, and with it the careful protection he'd built around his heart. The walls he'd constructed to keep everyone at a safe distance. The habits of self-preservation that had defined his adult life. When it was over, Marcus slumped forward against the steering wheel, gasping. His mind felt like a house with a room missing. There was a blank space where something important had been, and he couldn't quite remember what it was, but he could feel its absence like a missing tooth. There, the person said gently, and there was something almost kind in their voice now, almost human. That wasn't so bad, was it? Now eat your meal, Marcus. See what you've purchased. With trembling hands, Marcus opened the bag. Inside was a simple burger, perfectly ordinary, wrapped in white paper, a container of fries, and a large drink cup that was cold to the touch. Condensation already forming on its surface. It could have come from any fast food restaurant in America. There was nothing obviously supernatural or sinister about any of it. But when Marcus unwrapped the burger and took a bite, he understood The truth hit him like a physical blow. He saw himself as he really was. Not the person he pretended to be, not the person he wanted to be, but the actual Marcus Chen, who had spent his entire adult life running away from anything that might hurt him. He saw how he'd sabotaged his relationship with Sarah, picking fights whenever she got too close, always keeping one foot out the door. He saw how he'd coasted at his job, never quite committing to any project or goal, always having an excuse ready for why he couldn't give it his full effort. He saw how he'd let friendships drift away rather than do the work of maintaining them. He saw the pattern of his life, the same story repeated over and over. Get close, get scared, run away. He saw both futures clearly, mapped out before him like roads diverging in the forest. And he understood that this was the real payment, the real cost of his meal at Mr. Darky's. Not the memories he'd lost, but the choice he'd gained. The knowledge that he couldn't unknow. The responsibility that came with seeing himself truly. The person at the window was smiling again, but this time the expression seemed almost proud. You'd see it now, don't you? What you need to do, what you've always needed to do. Marcus nodded, still crying, still shaking. I have to go back. I have to try. I have to stop running. Will you? I don't know, Marcus said honestly, but I want to. For the first time in years, I actually want to. Then our transaction is complete. The person reached out and placed something on Marcus's palm. It was a small card, laminated, with the Mr. Darky's logo on one side. On the other side, a single sentence. You've paid your price. Don't waste what you've purchased. Your gas tank is full, the person said. Your hunger is satisfied. The forest will let you pass. But Marcus, the next time you come here, and there will be a next time, there always is, the price will be higher. The memories you give us create a taste, you see. We'll crave more of yours specifically, and the meal we serve will be harder to swallow. So whatever you do with your second chance, make it count. Marcus looked at the card in his hand, then at the person at the window, then at the faces in the forest that were slowly retreating back into the darkness. What is this place, really? He asked. What are you? We're what happens when people get lost, the person said. We're the price of the easy way out, the cost of never committing, the accumulated weight of every choice you didn't make. We're Mr. Darky's, and we're always open, and we're always waiting. Drive safe, Marcus, and try to mean it when you say you're sorry. The plywood slid shut with finality that made Marcus flinch. He sat there for a long moment, surrounded by the smell of fast food and his own tears. The card in his hand and the truth still burning in his chest. Then he put the car in gear and drove forward, following the railroad ties back to the highway. The drive-through disappeared behind him almost immediately, swallowed by the forest as if it had never existed. When he checked his rearview mirror, there was nothing but darkness and trees. But he could still feel the weight of the card in his pocket, still taste the consequences on his tongue. And he saw why he did it. Not the memory of why. That was gone now, torn out by the pale person's hand. But the mechanism itself laid bare. The fear that lived in him like a parasite. The certainty that anything he loved would eventually be taken away. The decision he'd made sometime long ago, that it was better to leave first than to be left. The truth didn't come with judgment. It wasn't cruel or mocking. It was simply showing him what was real, like a mirror that reflected not just his face but his entire soul. And what he saw was simultaneously heartbreaking and liberating. He was crying by the time he finished the burger, tears streaming down his face, his whole body shaking with sobs he couldn't control. The fries tasted like ash in his mouth, like everything he'd wasted, every opportunity he'd let slip away. And then came the consequences. He raised the drink to his lips, and the person at the window leaned closer, watching with their hollow black eyes. "This is the important part," they said. "This is where you learn whether you've actually changed." Marcus drank. The liquid was cold and sweet and tasted faintly of regret. As it slid down his throat, he felt something shift inside him. Not a memory being taken this time, but a possibility being revealed. He saw the future that awaited him if he kept making the same choices. The long, slow slide into isolation and insignificance, until he became a ghost in his own life, present but not really there, watching the world through a window, but never quite part of it. But he also saw another future, one where he drove back to Portland, where he called Sarah and apologized and actually meant it, where he fought for his relationship instead of running from it, where he took risks at work, where he showed up for his friends, where he lived like someone who understood that everything worth having came with the possibility of loss. His phone showed that it was 2:30 a.m. He'd been in the drive-thru for 43 minutes, though it had felt like hours, or maybe minutes. Time works strangely at Mr. Darky's. Marcus drove back toward Portland, slowly, carefully, his mind churning with everything he'd learned about himself. The highway was still empty, the forest still pressing in on both sides, but something had changed. He had changed. Not in any dramatic or obvious way, but in the way you change when you finally stop lying to yourself. He thought about Sarah, about the argument that had sent him fleeing into the night, about the things she'd said that had been true, even though hearing them had felt like being flayed alive, about the person he'd been and the person he might become if he could find the courage to actually try. The person at the window had been right about one thing. He couldn't unknow what he knew now. He couldn't unsee what Mr. Darky's had shown him. The truth he'd consumed would stay with him, a permanent part of his understanding of himself. Whether that was a curse or a blessing, he supposed, would depend on what he did with it. By the time he reached Portland, the sun was rising. The city looked different in the dawn light. Cleaner, newer, full of possibility. Or maybe Marcus was just seeing it differently, seeing everything differently. He parked outside the apartment he shared with Sarah and sat in his car for a long time, working up the courage to go inside. His hand kept going to his pocket, feeling the card there, smooth and solid and real, proof that it had all actually happened, proof that he'd paid a price for his meal, and now he had to decide whether it had been worth it. Finally, he got out of the car and walked to the door, used his key, climbed the stairs to the third floor, stood outside their apartment, his hand on the doorknob, his heart pounding. Inside, he could hear Sarah moving around. She hadn't left. She was still here, still waiting. He could walk away right now, get back in his car, keep running like he always had. Or he could open the door and face the consequences of actually trying, of actually committing to something even though it might hurt him. The card in his pocket felt warm against his leg. You've paid your price. Don't waste what you've purchased. Marcus turned the knob and opened the door. Sarah was in the kitchen, making coffee with the mechanical movements of someone who hadn't slept. When she heard the door, she turned, and he saw the hope and anger and exhaustion all warring on her face. "Marcus, I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time in his life he meant it completely. "I'm so sorry. For running, for always running. For making you feel like you weren't worth standing for. You are worth everything. And I know I don't know how to do this right. I don't know how to stop being afraid, but I want to learn. If you'll let me. If it's not too late." Sarah stared at him, and he saw her trying to read his face, trying to determine if this was another performance, another temporary promise he'd break the first time things got difficult. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. "You look different, like something broke open." "I went for a drive," Marcus said, "and I stopped somewhere. And I paid for something expensive, something I needed. And now I have to figure out if I'm brave enough to use it. He told her about the person at the window who had said he'd be back, that there was always a next time at Mr. Darky's, that the price would be higher and the meal harder to swallow. Sarah listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her own coffee cup, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you believe it will happen again? That you'll end up back there?" "I don't know," Marcus said. The person seemed pretty certain. They said people always come back. That once you've paid one price, you've created a taste, and they'll want more. "Then we'll deal with it together," Sarah said simply. "Win it. To be continued." It wasn't a full explanation. He wasn't sure he could ever fully explain what had happened at Mr. Darky's, what he'd traded away, what he'd learned. But it was honest, and that was a start. Sarah studied him for a long moment. Then she crossed the kitchen and stood in front of him, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, close enough to kiss. "One chance," she said. "You get one more chance, Marcus. But if you run again, I'm not waiting. I'm not spending my life with someone who's always got one foot out the door. Understand?" "I understand." She kissed him then, and it felt like a beginning. Or maybe it felt like he was finally present for a continuation that had been happening without him. Finally choosing to show up for his own life. They pulled apart, and Sarah went back to making coffee, and Marcus sat down at their small kitchen table and watched the morning light paint patterns on the wall. His phone buzzed with messages he'd missed during the night. His boss asking where he was, his friend reminding him about plans they'd made, the ordinary communications of an ordinary life. He responded to each one honestly, directly, without excuses. He called his boss and apologized for missing work. He confirmed plans with his friend and actually planned to follow through. He did all the small, unglamorous things that commitment required. And as he sat there, handling the mundane responsibilities of being a person who showed up for his own life, Marcus thought about the faces in the forest. All those people who had stopped at Mr. Darky's and been given the same choice he had, and chosen to wait rather than pay. Chosen to stay trapped in the moment of their own cowardice rather than face what the truth might show them. He wondered how many of them had been given easier prices than his. How many had been offered gentle lessons, minor revelations, manageable transformations. And how many had simply refused to learn, refused to change, refused to pay any price at all for their chance to see themselves clearly. The card was still in his pocket. He pulled it out and looked at it in the morning light. The logo seemed to shift slightly, the letters of M.R. Darky's rearranging themselves into patterns that were almost words, almost meanings, almost promises. You've paid your price. Don't waste what you've purchased. Sarah brought him coffee, black, the way he liked it, and sat down across from him. "Tell me about your drive," she said. "Tell me where you went." And Marcus did. Not everything. Some things couldn't be spoken, could only be experienced. But enough. He told her about the forest, and the sign, and the impossible choice. He told her about the price he'd paid, and the truth he'd learned, and the consequences he was living with.